Castellan picked up his meal from the hatch and, because he felt he should, took a seat across from his opposite number. He introduced himself and learned in return that the other commissar's name was Mannheim, freshly posted to the Krieg 42nd. Of course, Castellan knew what the subject of their conversation would be. "I was only on Dusk for a month and a half," said Mannheim. "I only saw the final stages of the campaign there, but I can tell you this much. The resolve, the sheer grit I saw displayed by those men." "But?" Castellan prompted. He knew there would be a but. "You must have served with other regiments before you came to this one," Mannheim said guardedly. Castellan nodded. "The Katachan 14th. Jungle Fighters." Mannheim was impressed. "I've heard they can be difficult." "Not especially," said Castellan casually, "if you know how to deal with them. I earned their respect and their trust, and they more than earned mine. The Death Corps remind me of them in some ways. They fight as hard and are just as unshakable. You know, the combined Krieg regiments have the lowest desertion rate in the Imperial Guard. It's as near as damn it to zero." "They certainly aren't afraid of dying," said Mannheim, mumbling thoughtfully through a mouthful of food. "In the right cause, no. And don't get me wrong, they are perfectly respectful. When I give them an order, they jump to it. You just don't know how to relate to them." Castellan guessed. "When I talk to them, it's like I get nothing back from them. I can't tell what they're thinking, how they're feeling. What is it that drives them, Castellan?" Castellan smiled tightly. He had asked himself that question more times than he could count. He hadn't yet found the answer, not completely. The men of Krieg didn't discuss their past. To them, it was a source of shame. But 3 decades ago, Castellan had made it his business to learn all he could about his new regiment, and this had included their history. It had been a surprisingly arduous task. Much of what had been written about Krieg and its people had been lost, in some cases he suspected deliberately expunged, from Imperial records. One single, dreadful fact, however, was beyond doubt. Barely a millennium and a half ago, Krieg had been laid waste by the bloodiest and most brutal civil war ever known to mankind. It began, Castellan explained to Mannheim, when the corrupt and decadent autocrats who ruled the planet declared themselves independent from the Imperium. "Of course," he said, "the citizens were outraged by this heresy." "Of course," said Mannheim. "So the autocrats sent their private armies out into the streets to crush any and all resistance. They almost succeeded. The man credited with the salvation of Krieg was one Colonel Jurten. When the autocrats made their move, Jurten had been in the hive city of Ferrograd, mustering a single Imperial Guard regiment. He had acted quickly, seizing control of that city, turning it into a rallying point for the resistance movement. Of course, Jurten and his brave men had been outnumbered thousands to one, and their enemies had had far greater resources than they, including control of the planetary defenses. The Imperium couldn't get a force through the autocrats' blockade to help the struggling Krieg loyalists. Jurten was fighting a war he couldn't win, at least not through conventional means. Then, buried beneath the Ferrograd hive, in a secret vault constructed by the Adeptus Mechanicus, the colonel had found a cache of forbidden weapons, antique devices of death that were anything but conventional. "The greatest hero in Krieg's history," said Castellan, "is the man who destroyed it. Jurten decided that if the Emperor couldn't have his world, then nobody could. On the feast of the Emperor's ascension, he detonated those missiles in the atmosphere." Mannheim had forgotten his food. Pink sludge dribbled off the edge of his spoon. "Then that's why the air on Krieg is—" "The missiles destroyed the ecosystem," Castellan confirmed. "Jurten killed billions of his own people, but he also evened the odds against him. The war raged on for another 500 years, but at last the victors emerged. "The Death Corps," said Mannheim. "They were forged in that nuclear fire. Have you ever seen Krieg yourself?" "Just once," said Costellin. "I set foot on its surface just once, and I wish to the God Emperor I hadn't." They ate in silence for a few minutes more, Costellin giving his fellow commissar time to absorb all he had just heard. Then, in a lighter tone, he said, "Look on the bright side. We'll both be dining rather better than this tonight." "I don't know," said Mannheim. "I don't know if I'll be going planetside. My regiment, they've decided to—" "Combat exercises," said Costellin, "and you feel you ought to stay with them." "Well, yes, I do." "They don't need you at the moment. Take this opportunity while you can. It'll be a long time before you get another one, believe me. The Departamento Munitorum has a habit of forgetting to apportion leave to Death Corps regiments, and the Death Corps regiments have a habit of not complaining about it." "All the same," said Mannheim, "I feel I should spend the time to get to know these men a little better, to understand what my role is here. If morale is so high in the Death Corps of Krieg, if discipline is no problem, then you don't understand why they need commissars at all. You always seem to know what I'm thinking." Costellin smiled. "I'm not yet so ancient that I don't remember thinking the same things myself, and you will find the answers to those questions, some of them at least. In the meantime—" He pushed back his chair and picked up his empty plate. "In the meantime, I'll be heading for the dropships as soon as we make orbit. I'd advise you do the same. Relax. Bring back some real food."